Welcome to episode 113 of the How'd It Happen podcast, hosted by Mike Malatesta. In this episode, Mike welcomes Ryan Mason, the CEO of Luxe Brand.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. As you heard in the introduction, I have Ryan Mason with me today. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. We actually connected by email first after Ryan came across one of my episodes with Steve Grubbs, I believe it was. And we had a brief phone call to get acquainted with one another. I was like, oh, okay, this guy's got a good story to share, and you're in for a treat today while we explore it. So, Ryan, I start every one of my shows with the same question: how did it happen for you?
Oh man, great question. A good way to start a show, right? So, it takes me back to college. I went to a small school called the University of North Alabama, in the Northern Alabama area. And that is where everything started. That is where a situation that happened to be I would say the best thing that never happened, right? So I was in college at the University of North Alabama, and I was on a full football scholarship. It was a very big thing for me and my family, and coming from a father who obviously played running back for the Green Bay Packers, for me, it was my lifelong dream to actually move on and go into the NFL. So not just me, but also my younger brother as well. But, life obviously throws us hooks and turns, right? And that's what happened for me. So a little along the way, basically I was faced with a decision to make. For me, about 3 years into playing on a full scholarship, I decided that, hey, I'm not sure if this is what I envisioned. And I had a lot of energy that I felt like was being burned in places where I felt like it could have been used to increase value in other places in life. So that is when I was forced to make my first decision. And that was to walk off of a full scholarship and pursue basically the rest of life, which I didn't know what that was at that time.
So you, when we first talked, I know you had mentioned before you made the decision as a junior, I think it was, to stop playing, right?
Yes.
You had mentioned that you kind of had a chip on your shoulder earlier. What did you mean by that?
Well, absolutely. I think, for me, I had developed a chip. I was already spending a lot of energy playing sports and playing football. For me, I just had this drive, and that drive literally, it transitioned from that same drive in sports over into the business world later on. But that's where the chip kind of stemmed from. It was me. I always had that knack to just go get it. And for me, sometimes, it's bit me in the butt a couple of times, but it's been more good to me than anything. And that's basically just choosing to do it. Take that step, that first step. Don't think too much about it. If you have a good feeling about it, if you feel like the value is going to be greater than the bad part of it, then hey, just go. So that's kind of where the chip kind of came from, and I was able to actually leverage that.
Okay. And how did your dad or your mom and dad feel when you told them that you weren't gonna continue playing football?
Yeah. So first things first, I would not even tell my dad. I was petrified.
Okay. So it was going to be like that. Okay.
Like, oh no, I'm going to be disowned if I say this. So I chose to hold off on that one, right?
Okay.
And then I decided to go to my mom, and she said what most mothers would say: "You've lost your mind if you think you're going to lose, drop a full scholarship, something that you worked so hard for, to do whatever," right? Because of course at that time I didn't really have a plan. My pitch was like, hey, my grades are slipping a little bit. I'm spending all this energy and time, doing something that maybe I had a kind of a lost love for at the time. And so then after that, I went to my grandfather, right? So for me, and mentally, I'm in my head, I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work with my mom, so maybe I'll go to the next nicest person I know, which is my grandfather. And literally he said, well, Ryan, I don't know. You just got to keep thinking about that. Keep praying about it. You got to keep thinking about that. But in my head, I knew the answer was you've lost your mind.
Okay.
So that's
Reading
kind
between the
of
lines, so to
some of
speak.
the things that I was dealing with, and eventually later on, after me just kind of just going after the business and try to like just me honestly, I was curious trying to figure out how to do things. Basically, I eventually built up enough courage to go to my father, and we'll talk about that. But that story was something that literally it didn't happen the way that I thought it would.
So you want to talk about that now?
Yeah,
Because
we can.
yeah. So you thought it was going to go. I'm just trying to imagine where this is going. So you thought it was going to go horribly, and you did these workarounds to get there. Now you actually had it. How did it actually go?
Yeah, so basically, I decided to for the break. So we were going into Christmas break right before spring practice started for football. So I'm still on a scholarship at the time, and I decided, hey, I'm going to use this time to figure something out because I can't look like I'm crazy again. So I decided basically to, go home and try to piece some things together. Had no clue what that was, and for me, I decided to, hey, maybe I'm very artsy, I'm very crafty. Maybe I can do something involving a shoe. So there's a guy on Instagram that I would always follow and just take inspiration from. And what he was doing was he was basically taking apart a shoe and he would replace the panels and everything with exotic leathers and, just different things. So he would use like ostrich skin, lamb skin, and just suede and all these really cool leathers. And he would create his own shoe basically. And with that, obviously, he was very good at it. So he was booked up and booked out for within about 4 or 5 months. He was booked for the entire year. So this was something like, hey, maybe this is my outlet. Maybe I can go to my father, or maybe I can go back to my mom and grandfather and figure, and have an actual case that I can actually, talk about. So to make a super long story short, I basically decided, hey, I was going to go start cutting up shoes. I found an old shoe at home. My brother is there, who's 7 years younger than me. My mom is there, and here I am taking an X-Acto knife and I'm cutting the shoe. And my brother's looking at me like,
Yeah. What are you doing? What are you?
yeah, my
Yeah.
my parents come in the room and literally both of them, they look in, see what I'm doing, and then they bat their eye like, what is he doing? And then I walk out the room. So, they're like, okay, well, I don't know what he's doing, but obviously he's bored, right? So from there, I had went to a local leather shop, and it was called Tandy Leather at the time, but basically went to a local leather shop, and I walked in and literally, obviously I was completely out of place. I had never been in a leather shop before, didn't know what I was getting into. And I built up the courage and said, listen, I have an idea, right? So told him about the idea. We went to the back, and basically we started cutting up leather. So from there, I had the idea of obviously shoelaces, right? So how could I make shoelaces? Well, from there, basically, I decided, okay, well, I had went through some testing, went through some practice, figured out, okay, maybe I can do this, maybe. So by this time, school's back in, right? Well, at this time, I need some help outside of the family to kind of plead my case, right? So immediately I go to the university website, and I remember I said, this happened to be one of the best things that kind of never happened. Well, I always wanted to go to a large school, a big, big school, and that didn't happen the way that I envisioned. Well, this allowed me to actually reach out to that school, and literally I was calling the dean and everybody that I could from the list on the school's website, and they all recommended me to a guy, and his name is Dr. Boral, by the way. But when I got to him, he said, hey, Ryan, it seems like, it seems like you got something. So let's meet up. So I went to him and we met up, and I poured my entire life story. And I needed, what I was looking for from him was an answer. Like, hey, either, yes, I think it's a good idea to, get off a scholarship and pursue this, or no, you have lost your mind, just like most of the people have said.
Okay.
So after that meeting, he said, man, this is a cool idea. And we're talking about luxury shoelaces at the time. And he also said, hey, I think, you already have your answer. And I remember walking away from that meeting just mad because he didn't give me the answer that I wanted. And I had spent an hour and a half, almost poured my entire life story into him. So I
You mean
decided.
he just put it back to you, in other
Yeah,
words, to answer your own
exactly.
question? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I went to one other guy named Dr. Calhoun, and I vented to him for about an hour and a half also. And the crazy thing about it is he said the exact same thing. It seems like you already have your answer. And at that moment, I knew it was time to go talk to my dad. Uh-oh. So eventually, I went and talked to my father, and I just told him, I said, Dad, it's been a loss of love. I just feel like this has been a burden to me. Just, I got so much energy that's been caged in that I want to use, and I want to go out and I want to experience things. And he said a couple of things to me, but one thing really stuck. He said, Ryan, it seems like you already have your answer. And he says, listen, I support you 100% in everything that you do. And that was the end of it. That was it. That was my yes, the yes that I needed to make the transition and take a leap of faith to start my company, my first company.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story, but it's amazing, right, how we, all of us, can talk ourselves into stories,
Yes.
create them all on our own, thinking about what could possibly happen.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes that's not the way, we just head trash, right? We're just creating our own thing. And instead of just going and getting it, right? I'm either going to get a yes or I'm going to get a no, right? Instead of me thinking about what all these things. So
life is not linear.
Yeah. So I'm sure you learned lessons from that going forward about asking for what you want, not being afraid of what someone will say if you ask for what you want, kind of thing.
Right.
And what about your football coach? I'm kind of curious because, you start to depend on your players, especially as they kind of move up, and junior to senior year is a big deal. How was that? How did you approach that, and what did that go like?
Yeah, well, honestly, I think for that approach, basically, I had to be honest. It's the meeting that I dreaded having.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But one day I had, after speaking with my father, I had enough courage at that point. I feel like that was a big obstacle for me to get past, and that was my dad, along with my other family members. But my dad was one thing. His decision and his opinion weighed heavy on my heart. So basically, I kind of went in there with the same energy and say, hey, I feel like, this is something, some of the energy and the focus, I could really use it elsewhere. And he literally told me about his story. He talked to me about his story, it wasn't the same as mine, but there were pieces of it that was similar that gave me, confidence and gave me what I needed to just go ahead and say, all right, walk away with my head held high and make it happen.
And those are two tough conversations. When I first talked to you, I was under the impression that you had the idea for Luxe Brands before that was sort of a motivation for you to want to get away from football and focus on that. But as you just told it, I had it wrong in my head. You kind of came up with that basically as a way to justify a decision that you'd already made, or sort of make it feel a little bit better to your parents or something, like, oh, I'm transitioning from all my energy here to this cool new thing I'm creating.
Yeah, that was it. And there was a lot of unknown. Oh my goodness. I just wish that I wish that I can go back and with all the information I have now, right?
Yeah. And it was also, I think, and we talked about this a little bit, was I actually don't know if it's unusual or not, but it seemed unusual, if you go off scholarship to actually stay at the school, which is what you did, right?
Right. That was another big thing for me. And most cases, when someone leaves a full scholarship, it's not by choice.
Yeah.
It's by maybe flunking out, failing out, or doing something that was not supposed to be done. So that was another thing, I just really felt like, oh my goodness, am I going to be put in this bucket or this box?
And obviously that didn't happen and you stayed there. And how did you continue to focus on school when you had this new business idea? And how did you get it up? Tell us how you got it up off the ground. And
Sure.
I mean, you sort of showed where the genesis of the idea came from, but how did you turn it into a real business?
Right. So basically, after I had, got away from the playing football, obviously I needed somewhere to put that energy, right? So here I am, super energetic. I'm driven. And at this point, I don't really know what for because it's mostly been football and academics, right? So for me, one of the biggest things that I did is I got into a class that kind of just changed the way of thinking, So I had, like, for example, the guy that I talked to you about earlier, Dr. Bora, and
Yep.
Mitch Ham. Those are two people that I can really credit the mind shift to because for me, I was being exposed to what it takes to really run a business and the level of thinking and the different thinking and the innovative thinking. So that was the very first thing that I can remember that really helped me with transitioning my business into a real business. So, at the time when I look back, I think I had about four different jobs that I was doing, whether it was working for the school or working for Mitch or, just doing different things just to kind of, learn as much as possible.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things for me though, is that I could understand that I really needed to feel my way to the top and get experience. And the only way you get experience is by doing it, you know. So for me, I was definitely the guy throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it stuck. And then one day it stuck, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I'm just reading a book by this guy who trains professional athletes. His name's Trevor Moawad, and I actually took it and I wrote it down because I thought it was so good. He said something to the effect of, the best athletes in the world, they don't feel stuff, they do stuff. It's like you can sit around all day and feel like whatever you want to tell yourself you feel like, but the people who actually make it are the ones who say it doesn't matter what I feel like because I have to do this because this leads to success. It sounds like that's what you were saying to yourself and what people were saying to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So along the way, basically, I was able to experience so many different things and run into so many people. And for me, that mentality of, hey, just do and just go led me to other people, other relationships who were able to help and pour into me so that I can manifest the vision, right? So that is kind of the beginning stages of me actually understanding like, hey, yeah, although I am, 22, 23 years old at the time, I can still do and make an impact. And once I realized that, that is when I started to see real growth.
Okay. And who were some of these other relationships that you had that got you to the point? Because I'm trying to, I started a business when I was 26, so much older than you were at the time. But I wasn't in school anymore, so I actually had to work and stuff. And so you got this great idea. You make this dramatic change in your life to go from being an athletic path to something different, an entrepreneurial path, and you do it while you're in school. So you're juggling, I want to get a degree and I got this thing going. So who are some of these other relationships that help you with that? Because it seems like, like Zuckerberg, Cuban, there's a lot of people who have done that, but there aren't a lot of people who have done that. There are very few, you just hear about them.
Yeah. So I would say, on the more personal level, there's a guy named Mitch Ham and Dr. Bora at the university that, oh my goodness, they literally, and also a guy named Brandon Gillis. And, these guys literally took me under their wing and they poured into me day in and day out. And they still do, And it's something that's so crazy because in my head, I talk to my mom about it a lot. And I'm like, Mom, I can't repay, some of the things that they've done for me. So some of the things that I can do is reach out and help someone and take someone under my wing like they've done for me.
Ah, yes.
You know, so I feel like that's going to be a great thing, and I look forward to just pour it into people because I've always had people pour into me.
Right.
Yes.
So you graduate
Mhm.
and you've got this business going. What happens? What happens then? Where do you take it? And because I actually have never purchased a luxury shoelaces, so I don't have an appreciation for the business.
Right. Yes.
I'm probably the only
Yes. So,
person you've ever met who hasn't purchased but I haven't. I have to admit.
hey, we're gonna get you some,
I
right?
like it. Yes, yes, that would be great. That was my
So,
poor pitch for free shoelaces, I think.
yeah. Hey, you got it. So, basically, from there, here I am left without a scholarship, right? So, this is basically how the things have transitioned into me basically building that business, right?
Yeah.
So the next stage, I'm off a scholarship, and obviously I'm moving in with my grandparents, who's in the city over from me, or the next city over from me, and obviously I have some responsibilities that I have no clue of how to handle, right? So, like I said, I had about 4 jobs. I was doing so many different things. I was interning and basically, and here's another thing. You mentioned just do, right?
Yeah.
One of the biggest things, this happened to me. I'd never forget. I had actually just got done pledging, so I had a bald head and no eyebrows,
Okay.
and sitting in a cafeteria one day, and I had on camo pants, a purple shirt, and spray painted gold boots. The picture, the frat boy, right?
Yep. Okay.
So basically, a friend of mine walks up to me and she's like, hey, are you not going to the career fair? And I look at her and I'm like, does it look like I'm going to the career fair? I know, of course I'm not. Well, she walked off and I thought about it and I said, Ryan, the worst that people can do is say no. And I kid you not, this is that very defining moment that just literally just put something into me. So I went to that career fair with all the apparel that I had on. And I ended up being interviewed on the spot by Sherwin. Well, actually, I'm sorry. The first time was E.S. Robbins, okay? And E.S. Robbins is a big local corporate manufacturing company. And we had such a good conversation. I was able to explain why I looked the way I looked. But immediately we had another interview, and I went on to that interview, and they offered me the internship. And basically, they're gonna pay me something small. I think it was maybe like $100 a month or something just for gas money.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and basically, I went to that, I bust my tail, and then the next thing you know, my mother calls me a couple of months later, and she is kind of like crying on the phone. And I'm like, Mom, what's wrong? And she's like, have you looked at your bills and tuition? And oh my God, my heart drops out of my body because I'm like, of course I haven't. I haven't had any of these kind of responsibilities. No, I haven't. And she basically kind of just stumbles over it, but she says it's paid.
Hmm.
And come to find out that basically, E.S. Robinson, that company was gracious enough to basically give me an opportunity and a leg up. And I went off of scholarship right back on the scholarship.
Wow.
And
And
that
they
at
never
that
mentioned anything about that to you. They just did that just completely.
Mhm.
Huh.
And that just shows you sometimes you just got to go. You may not know what it's going to look like, but you just got to go and perform and do. And basically from there, I had the courage that I needed. I had the stability that I needed. And a little after that, basically, we started to, about a year after me graduating and working full time in my business, we ended up landing on Good Morning America, NFL Network, Foot Locker stores. Literally had about 40 different athletes, some being DJ Khaled, Kevin Gates, Antonio Brown, some of the biggest football players who have played football and or celebrities. And all of that kind of happened just because of my willingness to just do and just go and think about it. You know, obviously, if I had a good feeling, this probably was going to be good, right? So for me, I had to just go at that moment, and that's kind of how that kind of worked together.
Okay, so I was thinking a couple of things. One, if the World Wrestling Federation had been there for the career fair, you could be a professional wrestler right now, looking the way that you did. Right? Like perfect.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know. Those guys are pretty huge.
Well, yeah, but it's more personality than it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
they script it for the good guys. So if they like you, right?
right. I would have had a signature move by now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you mentioned, you sort of glossed over Good Morning America, NFL Network, and all these things. So how that's powerful stuff. And you know, for a kid coming out of college with an idea that happened in the back of a store where you started cutting up things to, you know, in a very short order, being on those types of programs and getting that kind of awareness. Now I know how you've transitioned that, and we'll share that, you know, because you've used all of that to get into what your other business now. Right. But how did you know, how did you do that? How did you know how to get that attention and you know, get that attention? How did you know?
So, you know, I didn't. I literally didn't. I think there was a moment where I just literally, I mean, every opportunity that I had, I didn't say no to it. I said yes. I didn't know how I was going to complete it, but I said yes. And I went in there with my head held, you know, my head held high, and I tried to perform, you know. So now when I'm really thinking about some of the tactical things that really carried over was persistence, you know, being persistent. And I think, you know, for me, because people ask me all the time, like, how did it happen? Well, Good Morning America and Foot Locker happened 5 days from each other. And I didn't reach out to either company. Well, what this shows me is that some of the things that I was struggling in my mind to put together was actually working behind the scenes, right? So, you know, and this involved me just, you know, just getting on social media. One of the biggest things that I really relied on was social media, because I was in a small city in Florence, Alabama, which there is nothing around Florence. I remember the days of me borrowing shoes from friends until they told me, hey, you can't borrow shoes anymore, to put laces in for pictures. I remember going to stores until they told me, you know, hey, all right, sir, you cannot buy any more shoes and return them for pictures, right? So I relied on social media. And like, again, you know, for most of it to get started, I was still a college student. So, and I also didn't have, you know, just money sitting around that I could spend in my business. So I had to be creative, and I had to literally go and figure out how to strategically find these product placements, right, with different celebrities. Or sometimes it was, you know, not even just going straight directly to the celebrity, but going to maybe their agent or some of their friends. And it was a mixture of me literally nurturing those relationships through email and text and, you know, things like that. And not a single ad run. It was just pure effort and determination.
Okay. So I know how you reached out to me by email. How do you reach out to Antonio Brown by email or social media with something that he cares about?
Yeah. In a lot of cases, you know, it really depends, right? So number one is value. You got to give value, right? It's, you know, this methodology, it's like Gary Vee, what he says is jab, jab, right hook, right? You got to give value, and you got to give more of it first, all right? And then eventually, after months of nurturing, then you can eventually go in and ask for something, okay? But usually a lot of people don't understand how long that really takes. It's not, hey, a week thing. It's not a 2-week thing. Usually it's nurtured over, you know, sometimes most of the time months, and then sometimes years, depending on how big of a relationship or how big of the thing that your ask is for, right? So some of the big things that I did was I found strategic partnerships. So I was able to reach out with people like maybe Napoleon Kerber, who actually has a sports agency now. That's my brother. And I was able to reach out with people like him who already had good relationships with these people. And off of the relationship that he built, we built that relationship, and he was able to put me in front of different people, right? So in the same sense, I was able to do other things like that for other areas, whether that is, me putting shoelaces on, people who are doing custom shoes or, custom things. I was able to reach out and do, basically, we call it indirect selling, right?
Okay.
So the end goal is still to the end customer, but I was able to figure out the middleman and build with the middleman. And that has its own set of advantages because it can allow you to move faster once that relationship is built, because now you don't have to go and build 30 different relationships, right? You build one relationship who has opportunity of 30 different entities or 30 different people. Does that make sense?
So you're leveraging everyone else's network and to help you.
Correct.
Yeah. How did it feel to go on Good Morning America? Is that your first time on TV? And how?
Yeah. So actually, my laces were featured on Good Morning America. So I wasn't there.
You weren't.
I was in the background.
Okay.
Bullets, trying to figure out how in the world I'm gonna assemble a team of 15 people to ship out thousands of laces by a week, right? So, but that experience was pretty funny because I remember I woke up out the bed and I checked my emails, and I try not to do that now. But anyways, I woke up out the bed, checked my emails, and I have a message from Tori Johnson, who's the co-host of the show. And she's like, Ryan, we want you on the show. We love your product. Super amazing. And immediately a flag goes off in my head. And I'm like, this is definitely, there's a catch. This is spam. I don't know how this got in my inbox. So from there, we ended up getting on a call. And I remember asking, like, point blank, what's the catch? And they laughed. And there was no catch, basically. She said, Ryan, we like your product. We really do. So basically, the next question was, hey, all right, Ryan, so how many my next question was, hey, okay, all right, Tori and staff, how many laces should we be getting ready to sell? Maybe 1,000? And they laughed again.
This is because of the exposure that they would provide.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So basically from there, they recommended that I literally just sit back and literally get my stuff ready, because if I haven't received any publicity like this before, it is about to go down. So immediately I pulled together, thank goodness for all the help that I had. I was able to call Dr. Bora and Mitch and all of my parents and my brother and all of these different people. And my uncles came into town and family, and we were able to put together about 15 people to sit down and literally build out what this is going to look like and start to work on how we're going to handle production. Because now all of these problems have to come up that we have to allocate for, like quality control or time, just basically the timing of things, right? And people not showing up and so many different things. So at that moment, it was time for me to put my big boy pants on and be a real business owner.
Right. That's, and just like what you said, I'm going to say yes. I'm a big believer in that, especially young in your career. Say yes to everything that someone asks you to do. Say yes, because no one's ever going to fault you for having said yes and falling a little bit short. But if you say no, and that's maybe the last time you get asked,
Yeah.
Do you feel that way as well?
Yeah. So, and too, when you're young, you don't have a lot of responsibility in most cases. I mean, you could be 40 years old with a family and
Right.
kids and a bunch of other things that you got to be responsible for. But for me, I didn't have much of that responsibility at all. I didn't have, a family and kids and all these other complications and things, right? So, yes, I think, when you're young, it's the opportunity to really go out and try to make something of yourself. I dealt with this thing where, about basically me, hey, I tried to get a job for about a month, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really know how to interview. I was over here, talking about my business, and that, of course, did not go over well, right? But the reality of it was that I spent that time and energy in the early years on following my heart and following my dream, and for me, my mentality was, hey, you could always go back and get a job. You can always go back.
Yeah. Did you ever think about football again or playing football again, or did that go in the rearview mirror and you just moved forward?
I did. I thought about playing football several times after that. I mean, people would literally come to me and say, Ryan, like, hey, I mean, you were the best player I've ever seen. And for me, I'm just like, oh, yeah, but I moved on. I moved on. It was just little brief thoughts, and I didn't want to focus on what could have been. I wanted to focus on where I was and what was in front of me at the moment.
So how old are you now, Mason?
I'm 26.
26. Okay, Ryan's 26. So, and you've got another business now as well,
Yes,
right? BizBuzz is what that's called? Okay.
That's correct.
So before I get into what BizBuzz is and talk, I would very much like to understand from your perspective what you've learned between 21, 22, and 26 when it comes to some of the things you start with, not just starting a business, but the power of saying yes to things. How did you fulfill production on this big mega order these orders that started coming in, and how did you build structure around yourself so that it didn't fail?
Yeah. So I really relied on mentors. I really did. One of the biggest things that I'm most proud, and I still do this to this day, I go to my mentors and I ask them about the different people, like if they know different people and that I'm going to be meeting with, right? I ask their opinion. So I make sure that I'm meeting with good people. And also I make sure that I have good mentors around me. That cut a lot of fat and that cut down on a lot of mistakes for me.
Yeah.
Just because, in the production, like when we talk about production, obviously everything in business I knew nothing about at that moment, at that time of it getting started, right? So one of the biggest lessons were, hey, just trying to understand cost of goods and how that works and how the manufacturing process actually works and the intricacies and what you got to make sure of. And I remember putting together a pretty thick document, a couple of pages thick, and basically it was literally step by step and full of pictures and images on how the manufacturing process should work. And what I learned was that there is a process for every step of your business, everything. And what I learned was when you should start to document this stuff. So anytime you're going to do something more than 3 times, you should be writing it down. You should be recording it, whether that is through the camera or on the computer. You should be recording that, and then from there you should be able to, go back and start to document it in written form, not in legal jargon, but in your own voice of how to perform these processes step by step, right? So people, process, and platform. So that's the process, right? So I don't care if you're making a sale, that there's a sales process, right? I don't care if you're manufacturing, there's a manufacturing process. I don't care if you're filling customer support tickets, there's a process.
Right. And that's the way that you can actually build a business with replicatable processes, right? And that's not you, Ryan, having to do everything as if it was the first time it was ever done before. Is that where you're going with that?
Yes, absolutely. So if you think of it in this way, right? If you bring on a new employee or you're getting ready to ramp up and take some things off of your plate or take some things off of, maybe your team members' plates, you got to put a process in front of someone, and it has to be so well defined that they can walk in and they can understand it and potentially after a little bit of training use it, right? And there's a system of checks and balances so that they don't go wrong, or even if they are to make a mistake, that they know how to handle that mistake accordingly.
Well, you had good mentors, Ryan, because there are so many entrepreneurs out there that, even at my age, I'm in my 50s, that still struggle with that. They struggle with process, they struggle with systems, they struggle with patience that's needed in order to do those kinds of things. They struggle with, it's faster for me to do it myself than it is to show someone else, which of course is true. The first 3 times, and then every other time it's not true anymore. And when you add up how many times it's been, it's like, oh, geez.
That was a big one for me. You have to realize that, hey, I tell people all the time, Rome was not built in a day, and it was definitely not built by one person.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to understand that in order for you to grow, a lot of people we want to grow our businesses, but you got to understand we got to figure out how to move from, working in your business to working on your business.
Yes. So hard so easy to say and so hard to do for a lot of people.
It is. And, it's definitely okay. It's not something that you just give complete control of in one day. You take it bits and pieces. And, and that process, when you have that process in place, it makes the transition so much easier because now you know that, hey, well, did you check off the list or did you follow the steps? And you understand where the hiccups are coming from.
Right. Plus, the people that come along that follow the steps might be able to improve the steps too. They'd be like, hey, you know what? If we do it this way, maybe we can, and then you have a new, better process to roll out going forward.
So true. You always got to come back and revisit. Something we try to do every month, actually. Some people normally do it every 3 months, depending on how big the organization is. But we try to at least do it every month to 3 months. Just make sure that we come back and we look at that process and see, especially now, things are changing overnight, right? Yeah. So we got to make sure we are on top. Our sales process is completely different than what it was 3 months ago.
Can you give me an example of what's changed?
Yeah, sure. So now it's all, since COVID-19 has happened, it's all about, communicating, right? And being top of mind. A lot of people, I think they miss this opportunity because and sometimes, it depends, because it's hard, for one, I want to stay there, right? It's tough, sometimes there are things that happen that we just can't control and that it just puts us in a bind, right? But if you are able, one of the things that I think is a good time to do is always be communicating, right? So letting people know, hey, you're still there. If you're a restaurant, you're still open, right? Or maybe you're doing curbside pickup, or maybe you're using that message to communicate a completely different message. So one of the things that we did was we figured out within BizBuzz, we figured out how to, we service so many local businesses. We figured out how, basically the troubles that they were having. And we noticed like, hey, it's a hard time for a lot of businesses right now. So maybe we need to come out with some free software. Mm-hmm. We need to help keep these businesses open, Yeah. And give them access to these tools so that they can, manage their reputation, do social media, schedule all their social media content to go out, or maybe they can manage their listings and they can let people know if they're open or not on Google and Facebook and 60 other listing sites. If they're going online, they're making a transition to website or to online selling. Right. Well, we provided a free website tool where basically they can get in and it's a one-click website. They can click a couple of buttons and literally add their logo, and now they have their products and their inventory that they can start selling online right away. So that's a different example of how we, how I've and our company has been able to basically, make that transition and start to communicate a little differently. Because before it was, hey, let's sell. Hey, jab, 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 right hook. But now it's like, let's help. We're not worried about what's going to happen, money wise. Let's help you guys and get you guys rolling, keep you guys afloat.
Right. We're all in this together, and the most important thing is that we both survive, right? Because
Yeah. Right.
so before we started recording today, you shared some really cool news with me that I'd like you to share with everyone.
Of course. It's been, eventually today it'll simmer down a little bit for me, but I got some really big news. Yahoo has actually named me as one of the top 12 entrepreneurs to follow in 2020. And on the list, we got Gary Vee and Neil Patel, which are both people who I have always looked up to my entire life, especially Gary Vee. And just to be on the same list as those guys is insane. And I'm just so grateful and so thankful.
It's more than insane. It's more than insane. And how? So look, you said, I actually don't have to say this because usually I just record my podcast, and I go, oh, if you could only see his face, but you can see his face. Look at it. He's like, he's super jazzed up about this.
Just know I couldn't go to sleep.
Yeah.
When I finally got word.
How did you come to be up for this recognition, and what is it? How did you come? And then what does it mean? I mean, I know what it means to be included with other people that, top 12 is a pretty small list, right? 12 is not a big list, but
tiny.
Yeah. So
I'm still wrapping my mind around that piece.
Yeah. How'd you get there?
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where literally I don't have an explanation, but obviously something happened along the way. And I impressed someone well enough. I built a relationship with someone well enough to where they vouched for me, right? Or they decided to put me in that spot or in that position. So basically, last Thursday, I got a message from an old friend of mine named Napoleon Kerber. People call him Polo. He's the guy who has a sports agency, and he works with, by the way, he manages Nate Robinson and Carlos Boozer and a lot of really big people. And basically, he writes me. He says, "Hey, can you please send me a headshot and a bio?" And I have no idea, but my day was hectic enough to where I was like, okay, I'm not going to even ask questions. I'm just going to send it to him and then keep going. Well, I sent it to him and kept going. And he writes me a few days ago, and he's like, hey, you ready? Because it's about to drop. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what is about to drop? I have zero clue. Like, I have not an ounce of clue at all what he's talking about. And, for me, I'm like, hey, I've been watching him for a long time as well. And I say, hey, I know you got some big things going on. And he basically proceeds to say, no, this is about you, man. Just know every time that I get an opportunity to share your story, I do it, right? So at this point, I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be able to sleep. You're going to have to tell me something. So he eventually tells me, and he basically sent me the article, and it was released this morning. And there it goes.
So maybe you haven't had a chance to consider this, maybe you have, but what is that? What do you think that's going to do for you?
Well, so here's the thing. One thing I learned about being on Good Morning America was there's always a flood afterwards, and you got to figure out how to leverage that. You got to figure out how to use that. And
so in other words, it's a good thing we're doing the podcast today, because otherwise I would never get you on the podcast.
Not the case, but hey, I'm enjoying it. But I plan to package that up and use it to one of my next big milestones is I want to become a best-selling author with my book that's going to be releasing in November. And I also want to become Forbes 30 under 30. So I'm going to package that up, and I'm going to promote, and I'm going to just go, right, until hopefully something pops up again. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to package it up and use it. And, I mean, I'm just super excited and super thankful.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's an amazing accomplishment, and something I can say I've never been been distinguished enough to earn myself. So I'm in the presence of greatness. Thank you.
Hey, me too.
Hey, what's your book about?
Yeah. So it's called the Digital Playbook. All right. Secrets to building repeatable revenue through digital marketing. Okay. So what I've done, all of these wins and successes, basically, I have been able to formulate a process. I believe in people, process, and platform as the key ingredients to build a powerful business. Okay. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of the process that I've learned and that has helped me land some of my largest clients, right? And also some of my biggest wins, okay? And that is basically telling your story. So we're gonna walk you through 6 phases. We're gonna basically, plumbing is gonna be us, teaching you, and it's a workbook, basically. So it's gonna be step by step, very granular. It's gonna be just like the process that I mentioned earlier. It's gonna be step by step, how to connect all your analytics, right? How to connect your Google Tag Manager, your Google My Business, your Facebook analytics, your, business center or business profile, and all of that stuff. So once you have those analytics, it's almost like the plumbing in your home, right? You don't have running water until the plumbing is set up properly. What's the same way with your business? You got to understand how to track information. So the first phase is plumbing, which we're going to capture your analytics. Then it's going to be goals. We're going to walk through your goals, right? What are the reasonable and the actual goals that you can possibly hit, all right? And then we're going to walk through your content, right? We're going to teach you guys the 3x3 video strategy, which is basically 1-minute videos of why, how, and what. So why is basically you telling your story. Everybody has a story, right? You want to get that audience to connect with you, and that is the best way to do that is by telling your story. Then the next thing is the how, and that's going to be basically you showing your expertise on how you do things, how you achieve results, how you maybe if I keep mentioning restaurants, maybe I'm hungry, but how you cook, and the ingredients you use. And then the next thing is the what, which is the offer, jab, right hook. Okay. So after content, we're going to go into targeting. It's going to help you narrow down into the targeting and how to define those audiences and things like that. And then from there, it's going to go into amplification. And that's basically putting all of that stuff together, collecting those reviews and those testimonials and the videos and stuff. And we're going to teach you how to basically do advertising and build the best content by using $1 a day, only $1 a day. All right. So we're going to teach you how to boost those posts at $1 a day so you can find the best pieces of content to put more money behind. All right. And then the optimization is going to be the last phase, which is basically going to be teaching you guys how to optimize those ads and, in short, building repeatable revenue.
Huh. And thank you for that. How did you write the book? I'm writing my own book right now too. So anybody that says they've written a book, I'm very curious about. What was your process like? Did you have assistants? Did you work through, what did you do?
Well, I'll tell you what, one thing you may, if you want to figure out like, hey, maybe for me, putting that process down and putting it in book form so people can actually digest it was hard. Yeah. But basically what I've done is I've taken bits and pieces, one step at a time, one phase at a time. And I've taken some of the processes that we've used and we've compared and benchmarked those to other areas or other businesses that we've done, and we found the similarities, and we put all of that together in the book. So that's kind of basically what we've done is we've been able to take some of our existing processes and make them 10 times better by revisiting them, even if they're a year old or 2 years old, and figuring out, hey, what has changed and how can we be innovative, but how can we mix the older process with the newer process and make something that is easily digestible.
Okay, so can I get you to commit to selling me and Ryan McGuire signed copies of your book so that
absolutely
when it comes out? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Good. So you mentioned goals as one of the 6 things in that process, and you mentioned earlier wanting to be on Forbes 30 under 30. You have talked before about Just do it, say yes. How important do you think goal setting is for success?
Mm-hmm.
And if you do think it's important, and I'm assuming you do, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you do or you don't, I guess tell me why and what you specifically do, because I always love goal setters, so I'm curious what your process is.
Sure, absolutely. So there's this saying, if you shoot for the stars, you'll land amongst the moon, right? So the biggest thing here is, you want to make sure that you set big goals, because honestly, you have no clue what you're capable of. You have no idea. So that's my firsthand experience, right? So you want to set big goals. Some of the tactical things that you can do, though, is always make sure you write them down. My mom used to tell me left and right, Ryan, write down your goals, your ideas, and it didn't hit me until I started forgetting stuff and I started not hitting goals, right? So writing those goals down is the first step, and then making sure that you come up with a tactical plan that is even more granular of how to hit those goals. So you got a goal, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. You got to understand, how can you hit those goals? And it's almost like, when you start trying to figure out, okay, how I'm gonna hit those goals, you got to test and you got to optimize, right?
Yeah.
So most of the time you have a goal, but there may be 5 different ways to hit that goal. You got to figure out what's going to get you there the fastest, or in the time that you want to get there. And the only way to do that is by, starting fast and cheap, and actually just trying to make sure you observe and you have the right analytics and the right KPIs or things like that to measure to see what's working and what isn't working.
Right. I love what you said about goals too, because so many people, it seems like the issue that they have with goals is that they set a big goal, but then they don't do what you said, which is spend time on the tactical components that are going to be necessary to achieve that goal. So you set a big goal and you don't know how to get there.
Right.
So you don't do the tactical part. You keep looking at that goal and you say, I'm not making any progress to that goal. I'm getting frustrated about it. I don't know how to do it. Instead of saying, I'm not supposed to know how to get that goal. I
Right.
just know that that's a goal that I want. So in order for me to get there, I have to figure out the first step, and then the second step, and then the third step, and all of the steps that are necessary. Otherwise, it's just something I've written down that I don't think is possible, and
Right.
it won't be possible if you don't do that other stuff.
Right. And each step you got to test. You got to test. You got to go in and understanding that, hey, this may not be the best option, but I'm going to at least move forward and take it one step at a time and test each of those steps to figure out what's going to be plausible, and also what's going to be the most fulfilling and rewarding way to get there.
Yeah. Ryan, what's unique about you?
Whew. I think something that's unique about me, I think for me, let's go with, like, something that I really enjoy doing, and it's so funny.
Okay.
Most people, I really love to hunt. I love to hunt. I love to rabbit hunt, by the way.
What hunt?
And
What kind of hunt?
rabbit hunt.
Rabbit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I really do. And it's something that me and my father did and my uncles would do all the time. But when I tell most people, they are like, oh my God, you're crazy. But it is definitely some of the best eating that you can do. But I would say that's one of the more unique things about me. I definitely enjoy family. That's pretty normal. But just trying to think. Other than the fact that when I get about 40 or 50 years old, I'll probably be acting the same way that I act now, which is very fun and crazy.
Yeah. Well, you'll probably be a lot more well known by then too, because it seems like you've done. I feel like, I don't want to define what's unique about you, but I would say that based on what I've heard so far today and what you've shared, I'd say what's unique about you is that at 26 years old, you're not wondering who's going to take care of you. You're not wondering, who's going to have to help you. You're going out and you're deciding what you want to become, and you are becoming that.
Right. Absolutely.
So
I think, I can think of stories where, I would just talk to my mom and say, Mom, hey, you don't have to take care of me because I got it. I'm going to make it happen. And it's rewarding when you do that. It really is. It's super rewarding, just setting a goal and just giving your all to hit that goal and achieve that goal and proving to yourself that you are able.
I completely agree with you. I wish everybody felt that way, but maybe if they did, there wouldn't be as much room for people like you to to do what you've done. Ryan, how do you want people to get a hold of you? Is there a way that they can pre-order your book, for example?
Sure. So a couple of things. So my personal site, you can go to ryandmason.com, ryandmason.com. Or you can actually go to my BizBuzz website, which is bizbuzz digital.com. And the book, actually, if you go to my personal website, if you scroll down about halfway through the page, you'll be able to see where the book is listed. There's a section, and basically there's a button that says Get Early Access. So I would love for you guys to click that button and just fill out that little very short form. It's like 3 or 4 questions. And then I will go ahead and get prepared to send you guys early access, and would love for you guys to read it and get some value and share with your friends.
Okay, awesome. Ryan Mason, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you today on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories, and congratulations on your tremendous success and this most recent designation as one of the top 12 influencers to watch. That's by Yahoo, right? Amazing.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Super excited, and I can't wait to come back. Thank you.
All right, good for you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.